Join me for a conversation with photographer Chris Facey, whose work depicts the recent tensions on the streets of New York City during both the COVID-19 crisis and the protests of George Floyd's murder by the police. Chris discusses how his experience as a father informs his empathetic approach to photographing others, how his commitment to social justice through activism and art grows stronger, and why words and language matter. I'm Joseph Maida, and this is Housed 2020. You're a student in the BFA photo and video program,
Right.
and you're also someone who has experiences maybe that are beyond what some of our typical students have. You're a dad, right?
Mhm.
So you have fatherhood experience. I've been thinking about this in preparation for our conversation because in so many ways, as a dad, you're in a kind of teaching role too,
Yeah,
right? Sort of, you're a mentor for your kids.
I am.
So I
I
know
am.
you're a student, but you're also navigating this kind of, you're a student while you're also a teacher. You have that responsibility, right?
Exactly.
So I've been thinking about that as I look at your work. And so with that, I'd like to start by talking about the contribution that you made to House. And you made two contributions. So Chris, this was the first contribution that you made to House 2020.
Mhm.
And this was made as I think, were approaching the most intense moment of the coronavirus pandemic here in New York City. People
Yeah,
were
that's
scared,
right before the peak.
right? People were scared. People were being told to stay inside, to really have nominal um, interactions. And so you contributed this picture to House 2020, and you're in the world. You're in the world making pictures. So can you tell me a bit about your experience at that moment and what you were thinking about?
I was just in the beginning. I was one of the people that felt like maybe Corona wasn't as serious at first. Like I wasn't getting all the proper information. So I was saying no. I was hanging back a little bit. I was hesitant to go out to shoot, and I'm like, I can't because this is a change. I feel something different about this. So I'm just gonna go out. I'm gonna document a couple of things just to let the people that's at home know what's going on outside. So I'm going out. There's a few other photographers that will go out with me.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we're staying safe, mask and gloves.
Mm-hmm.
And we're walking around Brooklyn, and we just come to the scene. It's like this big tent. It just says coronavirus testing. Just the doors used to say welcome, now it just says stop before entering. Like it was just a whole change that just felt really weird for me. So it was also scary because a lot of people were losing their lives to this virus. So when I seen this sign, it kind of just spoke to that scariness, that eeriness of what the streets look like and how everyone's feeling right now, like at this peak of fear
Yeah,
of this virus.
it's interesting for me when I saw this picture, knowing some of your work that came before it, which we'll talk about in a moment.
Mhm.
The two contributions that you made to House, which are in some ways an anomaly, I know, because you were photographing people on the street as well, but the streets were much more empty, right? And so
Yeah,
this picture speaks to human interaction, but we don't see anyone actually pictured. So when you were making the picture, based on what you're saying, were you thinking a lot about, even though we're not seeing people pictured, it seems that you're thinking a lot about people's experience.
yeah, like how people are feeling, like how people that I've spoken to are feeling, how my mom was feeling. My mom expressed how like scared and nervous she was about this, um, and, and people's fear that resonated with me a lot to see that people are really nervous, like not just New York, but the world right now. The whole world feels like this. It's like the great equalizer.
Yeah, it's interesting for us to look at this picture now because this is a couple of months ago. And I think that fear still exists, but we know a little bit more, right? We actually have some slight shifts. Something though that I want to talk about the other picture that you also contributed. Let me pull up your second contribution to House. It's this image here, and again, there's no one explicitly pictured. We don't see a figure. I mean, there's probably someone maybe in the background here, but there's no one
Hmm.
explicitly pictured. But there are a couple things that ring consistent with the last image. And the thing that I see most prominently is that it's a type of signage, and language is quite important how the photograph operates. Can you talk to me about this picture, what prompted you to make it, and what you're thinking about in terms of language?
Uh, well, what first initially prompted me to make it was the mask hanging there. Like every deli bodega store that I was going into was selling these masks. They were hanging them up. It was new things to sell. It was new things to sell, and that wasn't part of their regular, I guess, inventory. So I'm standing there, I'm looking at this, I'm buying my drink, and I notice it's right underneath the Surgeon General's warning sign, like for smoking. And then it clicked. It reminded me that people are still out here smoking and but wearing masks, worried about a disease that affects your lungs, but they're smoking.
Yeah.
And I just found that like a crazy like oxymoron.
Why I'm so interested in this image, in addition to its beautiful form, it shows that you're really looking at the entire picture through the smallest details. Because when we look at this image, there's the risk that everyone had in their mind, which is COVID-19. But there's so many other risks that are out there every day, right? There's other risks that COVID-19 intersects with either directly or indirectly. So I think that the way in which you juxtapose that here is quite interesting. And so tell me a bit more about your overall experience when you were photographing during the peak of COVID-19 here in New York City, and then specifically in Brooklyn.
It was a good question. It was extremely different. I've never seen New York look like this, like empty. Like I've never seen it empty, really. Like barely any cars riding by, barely anybody outside. You just got small groups of people, onesies, twosies. Now this is just on the street.
Mm.
But once the days where the weather was nice, it would flip. Like it would completely flip. Once the weather was like 70 degrees or more, not as many people as New York usually has, but it was a higher number, much higher number. Parks were filled, and I found it way more interesting that a lot of people were taking their health more seriously. Like I seen a lot of people like in the parks working out, but in the beginning of it, people still weren't staying 6 feet away from each other. So it was just like everybody's outside for the weather. They're just gonna take halfway precautions, I guess, to protecting themselves. It was just interesting. It was just really interesting to see that juxtaposition. I've never seen New York like that in 30 years I've lived there. I've never seen that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this idea that we understand something and then one major incident can actually shift how we understand everything else is something that the pandemic has very much embodied. And with that, it's actually maybe a good point for us to talk about a project that you were working on before COVID-19, which is your Dad Duty project, photographing
Mm-hmm.
fathers. And as
Yeah.
a father yourself, can you tell me a bit about that series, when it started, and what prompted you to make this body of work?
Being a dad and an artist at the same time, sometimes it's pretty conflicting. But being a dad by itself is pretty hard, and I don't think dads get a lot of recognition. It's usually, moms. Moms usually get all of it, and rightfully so. But dads shouldn't be second-class citizens in parenthood. Uh, and I know a lot of Black fathers who don't really get the recognition they deserve, me included sometimes. And I feel like this would be my way of kind of making that happen. Um, you know, there's a lot of single dads who get up, take their kids to school, do everything they have to do, make sure they go to work, come home. Like they do the same things at the same pace, same rate as even single mothers do. And I just wanted to shine a light on that, showing them being active in their children's lives to kind of also break that little stigma of like that Black fathers aren't active in their children's lives. So I wanted to work on capturing like candid, intimate moments between, father and their children to show that genuine connection between them and how a real life situation would actually be.
Yeah, I
For them.
mean, I'm sure you think a lot about, as a photographer, you think a lot about representation,
Of
right?
course.
So, I mean, we can talk about this, right? But we can also show it, because I think what these images show, it's not through what we say, but it's actually through through representation, right? Representing fathers in moments of affection with their kids, in moments of kind of calm domesticity, or in moments of mentorship on the street. We see these kind of range of representations that are maybe not the standard representation that we're typically seeing in the media. But what I'm curious to know is that this is a project that you've been working on. When did you start it?
Oh man, I started the Dad Duty project early last summer.
Okay, so almost a year, right? You're just about
Yeah,
a year.
yeah. So about a year ago, I started the project. It was something I was thinking about for a while before I initially started it, and I was taking I guess like a critique class over the summer at SVA, and I figured that was the best time to put it forward to start working on it now while I have a critique class where somebody can actually look at the images and tell me if I'm at least compositionally approaching the subject, because I know the stories there, I know the moments are going to be there. I just wanted to make sure that I was really getting it to like the best visual representation that I can get at.
Mm-hmm. And which is something that I see actually as I look at the more recent work, which I want to talk to you about. I do notice that your composition continues to become even more considered. I think that there's a kind of way in which your composition continues to become refined. But there's also the understanding when I look at this picture, even without you telling me when you made it, I understand that it's made sometime after the middle of March because people are wearing masks, they're pictured presumably on the street of New York. So tell me about how the work you were making around COVID-19 and your previous series, Dad Duty, intersect, and maybe how making the COVID work may have informed how you return to this project and potentially change it.
Of course, of course. Well, I was out shooting, and me and another friend of mine, Des West, we were out shooting, and we seen Ruddy Roy out, and we went up to Ruddy. He was talking. He was speaking to us. He was, explaining to us that he was on assignment and giving us a couple of like photographic gems, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
He asked us what we were working on. I let him know that I'm really working on this Dad Duty project, and I'm trying to find the best way to properly show it. And knowing that he's done a similar project on Black fathers,
Mm-hmm.
I figured that'd be the perfect time, the perfect person to ask. And he just let me say, you got to find out if you want to do a piece like where you're following a bunch of different dads, or do you want to focus right on the different dads? I'm like, well, yeah, I don't know. I was still being a little hesitant. I'm like, I try to find them out in the street, and when I ask them, sometimes I'm being met with no. So you get a little bit discouraged about it. He's like, he just found a random person. He said, "Excuse me, sir, are you a father?" The guy was like, "Yeah." He said, "Thank you. Have a nice day." He said, "Look, it's that easy."
Huh.
And I'm like, okay, like and he did it twice. He did it twice in that moment, and I'm like, all right. So now I'm not going to be as pressured to that, to approach them like I was before. So I use that as a personal challenge to approach more Black dads, like, and be more direct instead of just accepting, all right, cool, it's all right. And boom, I said, I'm just going to do a portrait project. At least that way I'm there. We're stuck. We're in this moment.
Uh-huh.
You see the dads, you see their children, dead center of the frame, because that's what I want you to see. And having this interaction with them in that moment was good with me, because it was, like I said, it was a challenge for me to stop, speak to them, get to know them, ask questions, and really fine tune that composition, like you said, like to take that time. And I wouldn't have been able to get that time to do that had I not stopped, spoke with them first beforehand, explain to them what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. And every one of the dads that I photographed during the images that you're about to see, it was an amazing interaction. I think they were very receptive of it. They loved the idea of it. One father, I think, I don't know, did I send it? I might have sent it. If it comes up, I'll talk about it. But one dad said, "Oh, thank you for taking these images. Like, I don't have any pictures of me with my children." And I thought that's crazy, because I'm a dad. I take pictures of my kids all day to the point where they're sick.
Right, but you're also a photographer, right? So you
so
should the dad role, but not necessarily the photographer role.
Yeah, my kids are sick of me with this camera sometimes, and it's like, how you don't? I said, brother, don't worry about it. I'm gonna make sure I get you one of the best photos I have, and if you need any more photos, here's my information. I would love to, and I let them know, like, and this is from the bottom of my heart, because I really feel like those images are important to have, especially for the children to have.
I think in this work there is a sense that you're making the work not out of, I mean, of course there's the desire, but there seems to be something more than just kind of fulfilling a wish. Like, oh, maybe this is what I'll photograph. It does seem that these are coming out of some kind of a necessity, right? It feels that you're, and I think that that comes through with the ways in which, and especially the new portraits, how the subjects seem, especially the parents. I mean, the kids are kids, right? So kids have a
Yeah.
different exchange, but the sort of equivalent of you, right? The fellow dad does seem to look at you at a moment where there's a lot of kind of mutual respect and even reverence, right? It's a moment to say, like, I see you,
Mm-hmm.
you see me, and I can actually picture you. And there's an understanding that that moment of picturing is pretty important.
Mm-hmm. And
Um,
also I understand, and I also know what, sometimes what they're going through in that, in that moment, because I take my children out to the park and stuff. We play, so I know, I kind of get an idea of their head, like what was going on in their mind. Like, I got to be attentive to my child. I have to make sure I'm playing, make sure I'm with them. I'm seeing this, make sure I'm having a positive role. So, like, it's a whole lot of different dynamics you go, and that's just with being a parent. It just comes
right.
like that. But because dads don't really get that recognition, I wanted to take that time out to them and say, I see you, like, I'm you. Like, I
You
see a
know,
sense of
right?
pride in them. Like, I know, and you just want a little bit of recognition, just a little bit.
For sure. Yeah, there's a true empathy, I think, in these images. There's also, I think, an understanding of the complexity of the role of fatherhood. This picture in particular stands out for me just by the sheer fact that that's not just a dad with one kid. It's a dad responsible at this moment. I don't know if they're all his kids, but at that moment he's
They
responsible
are.
for those. So he's got 4 kids.
Hmm.
It's a lot of kids, right? And the idea that at that moment everyone is coming together, that all, not only the dad is understanding that, but the kids are really emanating such a kind of joy. And Chris, I mean, it's definitely, these pictures are, I believe, getting stronger because of your new approach, because of the ways in which you're connecting maybe more directly with the fellow fathers. There's an image that you shared with me that is perhaps resonating to me the most strongly. And as we were talking about a moment ago, this image is a kind of intersection between what you were doing before making pictures of the COVID-19 crisis in New York with your
Hmm.
Bad Duty project, and then seeing how you picture that during the crisis. So I'd like you to tell me about this picture and how did it come about? What were the circumstances here?
This was the gentleman that I was talking about, who says he doesn't have any photos of him and his children. I was on my way to photograph the protest at Barclays, and I went to the store to get some water. And his dad he was extremely polite. He said, "Hey, brother, you can go ahead in front of me. I got to get a couple things for my children outside." And I seen the kids outside with their mom, so I didn't know, that he was a part of that. So I asked him. I just stopped and I was like, "Hey, brother, if you have a few minutes, I would love to photograph you and your children when you're done, if you're comfortable." I said, "My name is Chris Facey, and I'm working on this project trying to highlight Black fathers, and that we're playing we have a very active role in our children's lives." So yeah, that sounds fine. Just give me a minute. Let me just get my kids they stuff, and I'll be right outside. So we just waited outside. He came out. He spoke to his wife, I believe, and said, "Hey, I'm gonna take this picture with the gentleman over here with the kids." I said, "All right, cool." They came over. I think I made it. I'm sorry about the noise. It's New York City.
Maybe you or me, so one of us.
So it's yeah, it's kind of lost my train of thought. So he was like, yeah, he was all for taking the image, and I'm making these portraits, and I'm waiting, and I'm just waiting to, like, for one moment for them to kind of like give me something honest, because the first time they're gonna give you like a real posy
Mm-hmm.
type of thing, and that's something I've learned from Michael Hausman here at SBA. I just waited for that moment, and boom, I clicked, and I think I made about 3 or 4 frames, and this was the one.
Yeah, this picture, for some reason, while it feels very consistent with the rest of the work, it does have it has something new to it for me. And when I was, so something I want to talk about in a moment is the newest work that you're making around the protests that are happening here in New York City and around the country and even in other parts of the world. But before we talk about that work, it's interesting that you mentioned that this picture actually maybe intersects all three projects, right? Because you were going out to the protest. This happens along the way. And when I look at this father pictured with his two children, I think about something that I read actually in some recent exposure that you've gotten for the great work you're making around the protests in um, New Yorker magazine, which actually says that you're a father of two daughters. So
Yes.
do you think of this as a kind of self-portrait? Is that maybe going too far to make that association?
No, I don't think that's far. I see myself in each one of these dads, and that's the feeling that I go off of when I approach them to make those images. That I see me in them.
Mm-hmm.
Like each one of these moments, I've been in these moments. I've been at the park with my kids. I've been out, you know, playing football, basketball, frisbee, jump rope, hula hoop, whatever it had to be.
Right.
I was there. So, you know, it's something about, and when you look at these dads, like a dad that's dedicated to his children, it's something about that vibe, and I can feel that. I don't know if that makes any sense. Maybe it's all spiritual, whatever, but I can feel that, and that's what makes me make the approach. Because I pass a lot of Black fathers, but I don't make images of all of them. It's a certain energy that I would get, and I in recent months of making it work, and I'm like, yeah, I see me.
Yeah.
They're me, and I'm them. We are the same person. So
Right.
I want to show that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it seems very much what I'm responding to in the picture too. I feel that also. So what you're experiencing in you're identifying these subjects on the street who are fellow fathers and picturing them in a particular way is translating to how I'm reading the work. So I think it's a really successful portrait. I'd like to pivot in a way to talk about what you've been doing most recently. And as you said, this is an image you made actually on your way to one of the protests that have been happening in New York City over a week now, since
Yes.
George Floyd's murder early last week.
Yes.
Can you tell me a bit about the experience of making these images and what prompted you to understand that not only you wanted to attend the protest, but that you wanted to picture them?
Uh, Sure, sure. Before I get into that, though, Joe, I want to thank you for uh, that letter that you wrote to the VFA photo department on behalf of all the protests and everything that's going on with Black Lives Matter and George Floyd. I definitely felt it was pretty genuine, and I want to say that I appreciate that. I do.
Chris, thanks for saying that. And you're welcome. And I thank you too, because we're in this together. I see this as our common, I know our experiences are not the same experience, and I know there's differences, but I feel a lot of gratitude to everyone who is also making work. I mean, as the head of the department, you know, my mission is to empower my students to use their voice to empower themselves and empower those around us. And so when I saw that you were making not only the work during COVID-19, where you understood that opportunity to picture a crisis, right, to go to the front line, then to see that you understand that it's in a way your responsibility, right? It's actually, it's not just an opportunity, it's a responsibility to use this gift that you have and to use your talent and to use this language to go out and actually show people what the protest looks like. I thank you for that, because that's really what our department is all about. And we take great pride in seeing students like you who actually understand that it's not just about having a technical skill set. It's about being able to use that technical skill set as a way to have your voice heard, to empower yourself, and to empower your fellow neighbor, your fellow citizen, so that we can actually prompt needed change.
Of course.
So it's a mutual gratitude, but I appreciate you saying that.
No problem at all.
Chris, tell me about this. I start with this image because I was thinking a lot about the empathy that's a huge part of your process, right? You've been photographing dads on the street. I don't know if this guy is a dad, but he is a young Black man. There is a kind of some point of commonality. Did you talk to this subject before you photographed them? Did you have any of the same
Yes.
engagement you normally would? Tell me about that.
Well, this was actually made yesterday. I actually made this image yesterday. I went to one of the protests at Foley Square, and we were marching, and then I kind of peeled off from the march to try to go and get some images from the march at Stonewall. I wanted to make sure I have a wide range of support for everybody, since everybody's coming out to support Black Lives Matter, and they were having a march over there for Black trans lives and the LGBTQ community over there. So I wanted to go and show my support for that as well. On the walk back, this gentleman was in conversation with the police officers that were standing barricaded. I have images from that. I didn't get to put it. I didn't want to overload the images. And he was having a conversation, but you can see that on my Instagram. I recorded the conversation he was having, a very heartfelt conversation he had with the police officers.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you. We're on the same team. I know, and that's what I'm trying to show people. There are a lot more good cops than bad cops. Same way there are a lot more peaceful protesting than rioters. I know that, and that's what I'm out here trying to prove to people. This is what's going to make change happen.
Misunderstandings and how he hated them at the beginning of this protest, and now he understands, he empathizes with them, that if somebody's telling me to SMG, I'm not gonna want to be positive towards you either. And he was really expressing, he was very genuinely expressive of that. And as he was talking to the police, that same talk ended up having one of the police sergeants come over and hug him, you know, to tell him that we're with you, we understand. And after that, I pulled the brother aside, and I told him that was very heartfelt. I really appreciate that. I think that's a conversation that was definitely something that needed to be had. And it would be my honor to photograph you. He said, of course, no problem. I took the image and he said, can you get a picture of me with the police for myself? And I made sure we went over there with the police officers, made an image of him with the police officers. And he was just a really good dude to speak to. I really loved his energy. I loved his heart. And I've seen him at every protest I've been to so far. He's been there with that same sign. He's been there. Every protest I've been to, I've seen him. He's standing there. He's screaming, he's yelling. And I've seen that transition that he was talking about, from being angry at the beginning to being more understanding at the end of these protests. I saw that change, like personally. I didn't know him at the time, but I kept my eye on him, you know. And he's really been about that. He did not want the looters and the rioters to speak for the people that are having the peaceful protests, the same way he didn't want the bad cops being, you know, the front man for the whole police all over the world. And he understood that, and I think that compassion and empathy was very needed. That conversation was needed, and I just love the fun. I just had to make this portrait for the show.
It's such a compassionate image that's, I think it's quite a gentle moment. There's a real gentleness, but what I appreciate about the picture is that we understand the larger context, that in anger, there can be compassion, right? In rage, there can be empathy. And these things are not, as so often we're kind of trained to think, separate things that don't coexist, right? There are a lot of things that are coexisting. There's moments of great unity and moments of separation. You can have these moments. And this picture is complex for that reason. I think, you know, you read the word anger so strongly at the center, but at this moment, I don't see this, anger doesn't seem to be what the picture's about. So I think it opens up a much more complex, beautiful conversation. And it's a beautiful portrait. I also appreciate that you recognize the importance of intersectionality, right? That there's a lot of fights that need to be fought in the United States for equity, for justice. The one that I think we need to pay the most attention to at this moment is Black Lives Matter. But this is Pride Month, right? And it's been beautiful for me to see the intersections where two groups can come together and find ways to support each other. And this picture really speaks to that. I want to talk about some of the other images that you're making here as well. And this picture was one from the newer group that you shared with me that stands out. Like the previous portrait we just talked about, Chris, language is part of it. And like some of the images you submitted to Housed2020 from your COVID series, language is part of it. Can you talk to me a bit about how you're responding to language and how you're picturing language?
Words mean things, okay? Words mean a lot. That's why people love poets to this day. Words mean things, and people just don't understand the power that it carries. So when people put their all into these signs at these protests, I feel like they're spilling out their heart. They're putting their anger or however they feel into whatever they got to do for these signs. This sign in particular, I made this image because when I read that tweet from Trump, it angered me. It really angered me, and it's like those were words too that he typed on Twitter. Those were just words, and you can say that, oh, that it doesn't bother, but that means something. He's the president of the United States. For him to tweet what he tweeted like that, people are going to see that. There's power to that. People are going to get behind that and start believing that narrative. So when I remember how angry I felt, and when I made the image, it was just me making the image for myself, really, to remind me that I seen that, and that made me angry, and that those words do have power. And so you have to be careful what you show. You have to be careful what you say and how you say it. And it was just been driving that force home for
me. Yeah. Can you tell me about this photograph, when you made it, and what you were thinking about? Not maybe even when you made it, but what you're thinking about now that you look at it as you're reviewing the work that you've produced.
I made this image to show the pushback. As a Black male in this community, and in my lifetime, in my experience, I've had several run-ins with the police that weren't pleasant. Different times I wanted to push back, and this gentleman is pushing back. He's not taking it, and I feel like he embodies the energy that all Black people and all the allies are having right now. We're pushing back. We're not going to just let the police abuse their power. You know, this was made the same day I made that image with the Trump sign. We were on a march from Harlem, and we walked all the way down to Foley Square from Harlem. And this is when we got right around Times Square area. Randomly, out of nowhere, in that Times Square area, it just broke out into some type of brawl, and it was just police rushing people and starting arresting people, and it was so fast. It just happened so quick. And I seen this gentleman like trying to push them back, like, you're not just gonna just run over here. And I made that image in that moment because that was strong for me, like the pushback, like, yeah. And after I made this image, the camera goes down, and I'm ready to help. I'm ready to help.
Yeah,
so
it's interesting.
There's a lot of images I didn't get to get because I'm in the mix of it. I'm in the thick.
You're actually there. I think that's something interesting to think about as photographers, right? There's the kind of ways in which we observe and we're the bystander, and then there's the ways in which we participate. What I want to say about this picture is, Chris, in so many ways, I see your empathy here too. The figure in the middle, I actually as the viewer become that man in the same ways that you became that man in that moment. And I actually feel the force, the intensity, the outnumberedness of that line of cops that are charging at me because of the way that the picture is formed. So I think that you're, something we were talking about earlier is how your work is, how composition and these things really matter. And your visual language here really does make me able to empathize even more than I might normally because of the formal language that you utilize. I want to have a look at some of the other recent pictures that you made and ask you some broader questions.
Okay.
And the question that I have for you, Chris, as I look at the newest work that you're making and think about how active you've been in the last week, both as a citizen and a photographer, as an activist and an artist, what do you, when you look at your work now and the work that you've made over the last week, has it changed your perspective at all? Or has it changed what you think, what's motivating you, or what it is you're working to say?
It's a really good question. It just further pushes the narrative for me that these images matter, that this is history, and history needs to be made. Like, I think the same photographers that came before me, like Don Hogan, Charles Gordon Parks, and these people, like, when they were photographing events and things like this, they weren't thinking, oh, maybe I shouldn't, this, that, and the third. They were thinking, this is history, this is happening right now, this is for my people, and if this is how I can contribute, this is how I can help, I will. So it shows me that to take more pride in what I'm doing, that don't just take pictures willy-nilly. Like, this is what that meaning is of making images. And I finally can connect with that statement that we're making images, because this is important. This is bigger than me. And I want this to be bigger than me. I want this to be bigger than the world. Like this, I need everybody to catch on to understand the story, and that it's a Black man telling the story of Black people, so that story don't get lost by the other people who may be the gatekeepers in the areas that we might not be in just yet.
I think the great news, Chris, is that you understand that, and people are paying attention. The New Yorker used your work as a way to show what these protests look like. And that's a huge honor. With that, though, I want to ask you one last question, which is, what is it that you hope your pictures might do for a viewer? How do you think it could maybe, I understand how it's working for you, but what's your hope in terms of how it may activate your audience?
I want the audience to see people for people. Don't see color, don't see creed, nationality, see people for people. See love. See that the need for love is even more important now than it's ever been, because there's already enough hate, and look where hate got us. Hate got us protesting, hate got us rioting, hate got us scared to go outside and talk to police officers out of fear of our lives. Just on a simple thought, excuse me for a second. The soundtrack of New York for the past couple months. Like, just see people. A lot of people are hurt, and I'm so thankful for the allies that have been coming out and in support of this, because yesterday when I was at one of the protests, I'm always the protester first. I'm always a Black man before I pick up that camera. And I'm sitting there and I felt joy as I'm looking. I had my fist up and I'm looking at all the people going by and supporting. It was like, that's needed. That in conjunction with that gentleman having that conversation with the police officers, it was just that. That is what I want from the images. I want everybody to feel that need for love, that you're just a person like I am. You breathe the same air that I breathe. You put your pants on one leg at a time like I do. We are no different. And that's what I want people to see.